I'm very pleased to welcome Sheri Selph, who is the Creative Director and Assistant Professor of Graphic Design here at Middle Tennessee State University. She has 20 years of experience in the professional creative industry, where her areas of expertise are creative direction for marketing and advertising, and the auxiliary fields of branding, photography, website and social media promotional design, direct marketing, and motion graphics. Prof. Selph has done work for Fortune 500 companies, everything from retail banking to casinos to healthcare. And this includes print and online design for the Wyndham Hotel Group, MGM Resorts, Caesars Entertainment, Wells Fargo, BBVA, Compass Bank, Disney, Ferrari, Hyundai Motor Company, and the Kroger Corporation, to name just a few. She's recently led creative initiatives on projects by grant contracts with the state of Tennessee and the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. She teaches courses here at MTSU, which include word and image, interactive design, typography and motion, and graphic design senior capstone. If you get a chance, I would highly recommend that you take a look at Prof. Selph's website. I was struck both by her graphic designs and her medium, but also by her teaching philosophy, in which she discusses the impetus on graphic designers to transcend words and images in order to connect with audiences and aspire to make valuable contributions to our visual environments. I'm going to end by quoting from her teaching philosophy. She says, "I challenge aspiring designers to use their skills and talents to make positive contributions to humankind. I believe that we as designers should not be complacent with adding more content, but we should instead aspire to make valuable contributions to our visual environments. We are bombarded with words and images every day, but a great designer will stand out when he or she succeeds in making that all-important connection with his or her audience." So join me in welcoming Professor Selph. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. That was a great intro. So yes, I'm Sheri Selph, and I teach in the Department of Art and Design, and specifically in graphic design. I've been here for about 7 years, and it's been really interesting to see MTSU and all the changes, especially now that we're online, that we're continuing to grow and adapt to. So this is just kind of a fun experiment that I was doing with the slides, and I really wanted to use this today, like having my face in the corner of my slides. So this is my first time I've done this, and hopefully it's a good experience for you guys too. So when Rebecca asked me to speak to this class, I got the title of the series, which I think that y'all are just amazing for coming up with such a title, because when I really started to research what I was going to do, I found just like a lot of options. Every single thing I started to chase down, it was like I went down a rabbit hole and thought, well, I could talk about this or this or this, and it just kept going on. And I really just thought, perhaps I need to come at this from the perspective of what I do. As a designer, as a creative director, as an art director, as someone who's done this job for something like 20 years. So I'll run through a list of titles that I've had in the past, because you may be thinking, oh, she's a graphic designer. What does that really mean? So I have had the title of graphic designer. I've had the title of art director. One company I had called me a visual design specialist. And then I reassigned my name or my title to be creative strategist. I've done web design. I've been a freelance designer. I was officially an associate creative director at one point. For the last 7 years or so, as I've been working freelance, I've taken on more of a title of a creative director, having a more direction, experience, ways to mold and lend a project through my personal vision. So, and then I'm also an assistant professor of graphic design now. So that's me and what I do. So images and icons have a historical context. I obviously have some experience in that, as I have both a BFA and an MFA in graphic design. But I am not a historian. I'm probably not going to be the best person to chase down where that came from or what the history on that is. And so instead, I thought it might be beneficial to you guys if I just talked a little bit about how I approached images and icons and how I use them and how I interpret them and how I relay them back to people in graphic design. And so by bringing you my methodologies in this, perhaps that it'll help you in whatever endeavors that you seek to do in the future or that you're working on right now. So historical context versus everyday context. So I'm sure that you guys have had some excellent speakers chase down some of the historical context of symbols and imagery, but I'm really dealing with what's happening right now, what's happening today. My job involves trying to figure out what the audience thinks and trying to relate and communicate to the audience. So since you are my audience today, my job is in some ways trying to figure you out. It's how people interpret images and icons at the moment, and you know, how we can communicate better with each other. So I'm going to run through a bit of an experiment by giving you a few pairs of objects to respond to. So we're in a way reenacting a study that was originally conducted by the Martinez Center at the Massachusetts General Hospital at the Harvard Medical School. So you'll have a poll and it'll say, which of these do you find preferable? And you'll have an object A and an object B. So Rebecca, if you can launch the poll, we'll do this. So which of these do you find preferable? All right, I love this. Okay, so let's look at the next one before we sum this up. Okay, A or B on this one? A or B on this one? Okay. A or B on this one? And the last one in this series, A or B? Okay, so that was quite enlightening to me. I have not run that test before, but the results of this particular study were originally published in 2006 in a volume of Psychological Science. And according to our polls, our 1, 2, and 3 matched up with their findings. On our 4 and 5, we actually did not match up with their findings, which is interesting. So the first 2, there was an item, a wearable item, a watch. Fashion, I would put that in the fashion category. And the second one, there was the sofa. So we have interior design or industrial design. And then that third one was an abstract shape. The fourth one was an abstract shape, and then that fifth one was typography. So those last two didn't match up with their studies, but the first three did, and overwhelmingly they did, which I was interested to see that we actually did coincide with what their findings were, and that their findings were humans prefer curved visual objects. So the same results today, I would say we actually did. We actually did overwhelmingly prefer the curved objects. So their test was a little bit more sophisticated. They had people rank the objects. So there was a quantitative to it. We were kind of doing like a loose A or B preference. But there could be other reasons that our study was a little bit different on those numbers 4 and 5. So Susan Wycheck brings up this study in her book, 100 More Things Every Designer Needs to Know About People. And it's a book that I often like to refer to, even though a lot of what I do has to do with just using intuition and what I know about art and what I know about the principles of design. But in her book, she says people gave higher liking ratings to objects with curves. So that might be where we get some of this furniture design that has a lot of curves to it. Another product or design that we should talk about that has curves is the 1910s Coca-Cola bottle, which was also called the Mae West bottle, as people associated it with the actress's famous curvaceous figure. And the first reference to the bottle as a contour occurred in 1925 in the French magazine Le Monde, which described Coca-Cola bottle with a distinctive contour shape. So those studies of preferences to curves may have come from Coca-Cola knowing that this was a popular figure of the time. And she also sported a popular hobble skirt design that was part of fashion at the time. So Susan Wycheck in her book also says 100 more things every designer needs to know about people. She says Nike, Apple, Pepsi, Coca-Cola, and dozens of other well-known brands use one or more curves in their logos. So they've obviously done their design homework. So Barr and Netta's theory, the original publishers of the paper, was that sharp and angled images conveyed a sense of threat, and that we were overall pleased by or more attracted to those curvy figures, those curvy shapes. So then we have to look at, well, what if we need a warning? What if we don't want something that's pleasing, but we want something that's a warning? So how can we warn future generations of the presence of nuclear waste disposal sites when we have no idea what languages will be understood at the time? So this is our symbol for radioactivity that we know because we've learned it as a symbol. So even though it does have some associations with the science behind how the radioactive waste distributes itself, most of us don't understand that. So we have to really learn that this is what the symbol means. So an icon has a physical resemblance of the thing that is being represented, like a photograph. Index shows evidence of what's being represented. A good example is using an image of smoke to indicate fire. But then a symbol, which this is really most of us, what we see this as, has no resemblance between the signifier and the signified. The connection must be culturally learned, like numbers and alphabets. For example, there's nothing inherent to the number 9 to indicate what it represents. It must be culturally learned. So a little bit of history on that radioactive trifoil began in 1946, the University of California in Berkeley. The symbol was doodled by members of a research group. It would best symbolize the degree of hazard, type of activity, etc., but which was simple in design. It was supposed to represent the activity radiating from the atom. And then this goes over what we might see as an icon, which is directly representational, what we might see as an index. It has some relation to things that it's representing, like poison or death, and then symbol, which we have to learn. So then it made me think about this other thing. So I was kind of chasing down, well, what do we do with symbols? What can we learn by this? How do I bring this back into designing logos and such? And this was a story that I really liked from 99% Invisible, which is a podcast that's all about design. It could be of any type of landscape design, graphic design, but they really studied that. So he brought up in that podcast a panel of experts commissioned by the Sandia National Labs, addressing the problem of warning future generations about that nuclear waste disposal. So when we're dead and gone, long in the future, we have to have some way to warn those future generations. And in that, they had a design brief. So the design brief required that the markers remain standing for the life of the radioactive hazard, which could be up to 10,000 years, that it clearly warned people to stay away from the area, and that it assumed that those future generations would not be knowledgeable of radioactive hazards or speak any language known today. So just as we saw that people preferred those curvaceous, those curved figures from our earlier test, they took what they knew about what people preferred, and they used archetypes. So archetypes are universal patterns of form, social role, and story that have innate appeal or influence. So using that theory of archetypes, knowing that we find curved figures appealing and sharp figures a threat, they went on to use some archetypal forms like parched earth, something that is snake-like, something that has claws, and something that has thorns. So they proposed that idea using these themes and forms, and archetypes influence perception on an unconscious emotional level, because we're all descendants from early humans, and early humans had to survive, so they had to watch out for things like snakes and claws and thorns. So we learned that and we carry it with us. So from that, I really got to the point of symbols and icons relate to their audience. And so in this case, my audience was you guys today, but the audience is also really humankind. So understanding that humans descended from other humans allow us to follow archetypal principles in design. And so then how else do I study an audience? Because I wanted to bring this back to what do? I do have certain design principles that I rely on. A lot of things are based on archetypal forms. But then when I'm studying an audience, I also have to look at things like generations. So this might be kind of related to demographic data. It's actually a part of demographic data. But I think a lot about generations and generational perceptions of what's out there. And this is just a breakdown that I found that kind of shows us a little bit about the formative experiences of each of these generations: maturist, baby boomers, Generation X, Generation Y, Generation Z. So whenever I'm speaking to an audience, I'm always trying to decide, well, what generations are they in? And particularly when I was working in marketing, we had a lot of these breakdowns on how we should be speaking to different sections of our audiences. They might have a signature product like an automobile, a television, a personal computer, something that they grew up with, that they can't imagine life without. Whereas it might not mean as much to a later generation. So Generation Y, you have the tablet and smartphone. I remember more personal computers being around when I was a child. But you know, sometimes we can do with or without the automobile. Communication preferences, face-to-face. We have certain things like SMS or email, and now everything is online, mobile text messaging. So there's a lot more to this, but this would be one thing that definitely influences how I see audiences. So then we have demographics versus psychographics. And I just wanted to point that out a little bit, because demographics are more about your location, your age, and your gender. And whereas psychographics are reliant on personality, opinions and attitudes, interests, and political affiliations. And where we would get a lot of our data when I was in marketing had to do with magazine subscriptions. So these data sets have been around for a while, and they're categorized in a lot of other ways. But if you think about some of that early data they were collecting was, well, what magazines did you subscribe to? What were you interested in? So psychographics are where the information focuses on psychological factors such as motivations, beliefs, and priorities. So still thinking about my audience, I've got my archetypal forms, I've got my psychographics versus demographics, and then you have the freedom to develop your own taste and to be subject to outside influences. So of the following pairs of images, which ones of these would you find preferable? I have A or I have B. Okay. So let's look at that again with color and just say, well, which ones of these do you find preferable, A or B? Okay. And now, which ones of these would you find preferable? So it's so interesting to see how that swapped. Our first poll, our first two slides, overwhelmingly the slide or the image A won. And then once you were able to factor in your own either influences or personal taste, and given that we are a little bit closer to Atlanta, a little more, but in the South, someone says I'm not falling for that trap. You know, we all of a sudden switched to Coca-Cola. I'm Coca-Cola myself, but my husband's a little bit more Pepsi. So anyway, we can be influenced by other things other than visuals. So did you know which logo you were choosing? Did you know that when you picked the black and white? I'm not sure if you did, because our number actually went from 73% on A on the Pepsi side to 81% on the Pepsi side with the blue and red color. And then we dropped that way back and we went for about, I think it was 66% for Coca-Cola by the end. All right, so when I'm studying audiences, I have to think about, you know, how are things relative to people once they've been influenced or once they've developed their own particular taste. So symbols and icons are relative to the audience. They can be based on parent or peer influence. And they can be based on how you choose to build your personal identity. And they can be influenced by your personal preferences. So all of that to say, number one thing that a graphic designer has to deal with, graphic designers always start with and study who is the audience. So that's where we're really looking at number one, who's the audience and how do we speak to them? And then there's symbols, icons, and the influence of art. So symbols are a visual language. And that made me really think about, well, what do I do when I am putting together a piece of design? I'm thinking about the principles of art, the principles of design, and art really can be defined in so many ways. So it's not just visual arts. We have visual, we have audio, auditory, we have performing arts, and they are artifacts of expression. And even though I could go on and on defining and talking about art, and all the different ways that something is art or isn't art, what I really think of as how art relates to design is that it has the ability to start or influence a conversation. So no matter what the medium is, if I think that it had the ability to start or influence a conversation, that's to me where I define it as art, or how I begin to create art. So we can consider the freedom and influence of art, and we can consider that artists explore unique and original ways to approach a topic. And then I just wanted to point out that, again, beyond visual arts, there's also music, pop culture, and fashion. And when we see all of these things collide in one space, I would say this is where we're seeing a lot of these things collide in one space, where they come together, or where they collide. So you've got your music, your pop culture, your visual, your fashion, all coming together, whether you see that as a positive or a negative thing. But we are what we love, and I've worked in advertising too. And so advertisers know this, and they seek out where popular culture happens. And that's where they might push a bit more of their agenda. So a lot of you might be thinking of going into advertising, and you'll start to see that crossover where your personal preferences lie, where your career might kind of lead you into. And then we get to where, is everything art? I'm not sure. It has the ability to influence the conversation. Some of these to me are more design and more visually pleasing than others. You might have your own opinions. Sometimes in marketing, sometimes in graphic design, we're out to get attention and not necessarily to make things as pleasing as possible, although I try to do that. But sure, any of these could be design, whether they're really thought of as good design or not. That might be an opinion of a professional or of yourself as you build your own personal preferences. So symbols and icons are visual communication, and artists explore unique and original ways to approach the topic, and experimentation and change is constant. And so I really wanted a good example of design to follow all of those crazy Instagram posts that are out to get your attention and get your money. And so this was a piece that a former student who graduated from graphic design in our graphic design program a couple years ago, Alex Miracle, posted on his Instagram this week, and I just thought it was amazing. So I wanted to include that. So you should check out at alexmiracle.studio if you want to see some more of his work. So relating that to what I do, the first one's audience, the second one's art. I'm always thinking about art. I'm using visual communication. I'm taking liberties to explore communication in an experimental way. And if I had to give you some advice going forward, if you happen to think about taking the same career path that I've taken, or going into advertising or marketing, when speaking to an audience through visual language, I would say, yes, be creative and artistic, find original ways and meaningful ways to deliver your message. Take some chances, but then make your messaging responsible. Don't be divisive or deliver messages that mask the truth. And so then I'm really thinking, well, from looking at the audience, from looking at the expression, to taking what it really means and putting it into action. So I'm going back to those symbols. So I'm still thinking symbols, trying to not get off topic too much and chase down that historical internet rabbit hole. But I had to go back to the heart because it was in the title of my presentation, and what we heart. And so I really had to think about, where did that heart shape come from? Because I use it all the time. I do a lot of research on Instagram. I do Instagram posts for clients. I do Instagram posts for our department. I seek out artists on Instagram. Our students use it a lot in the art and design department, in the Department of Art and Design. And so I had to go back to the heart, and I kind of looked around to see what kind of historical connotations that heart shape had. So one theory was the heart shape came from the silphium plant, which apparently was greatly valued at the time. They valued it so much. It had contraceptive properties, according to history.com, and that they put it on a coin and they had given it value. Maybe the heart shape came from misinterpreted anatomy drawings. As the doctors were examining the bodies, they were talking about 2 chambers and a line down the middle. And so perhaps somewhere between knowing what we know about plant anatomy and knowing what we know, or thinking we might figure out about human anatomy, something of this sort of shape was created. And then there's the heart as a verb. So I'll let you go back to your history professors, your historians here on campus, and ask them a bit about the first 2, because again, that's really not my specialty. But heart as a verb, and the way that I used it kind of is. So the heart as a verb, the first time the heart was used as a verb is widely credited to a designer named Milton Glacier, and there he is. And he did this symbol, this very famous I heart New York, I love New York. It's a slogan, a logo, and a song that are the basis of an advertising campaign used since 1977 to promote tourism in the state of New York, including New York City. The trademarked logo is owned by the New York State Department of Economic Development and appears in souvenir shops, brochures throughout the state, some licensed, many not. So anybody have a shirt like this? Like, how many people have a shirt like this? There really wasn't a poll, but I would be so interested to know if y'all are Milton Glacier fans. So Milton Glacier, he has so much work. I had to include him because he's really a hero of graphic design. We kind of consider him like one of our greats, one of our national treasures. And he did actually just pass away at the age of 91 just this summer. So his website, which I'm kind of in the way of down here, miltonglacier.com, I really could not even begin to pick out what I thought were his most important works. So I did kind of a snapshot, and you can go and check him out. But I did particularly love this photo of him getting the National Medal of Arts from President Barack Obama in 2010. So I wanted to drop that in here. And then we see the heart used as a verb so much now. It was in Instagram as something you could heart. Instagram and Facebook joined forces. Now you can like or be surprised or laugh at or heart things all over Facebook. So 43 years later, we use that heart as a verb here. And so that first thing, just going back to symbolism, is relative to what we know about the audience. Art and design has the ability to begin, blend, or bend conversations. And then symbolic meanings can change over time. So let me get on the way of my slide here. So that heart, wherever it came from, whether it came from the plant anatomy, drawings of early human anatomy, the coin, all of those other things that your historians could probably tell you about. Its meaning now almost has become, do we like it on Instagram and Facebook, or do we not like it on Instagram and Facebook? We love everything now. We heart so many things. And how we use symbols can change over time as well. So I kind of wanted to wrap this up with some symbols that have changed their meanings over time. And so one that came up again and again, which I mean, I love to look at and probably shouldn't because it means death and pirates and poison, is the Jolly Roger. So 99% Invisible kind of led me down this design history path, and so I had to include it as well. So one of the most feared symbols in the world, the Jolly Roger, represented death, pirates, and poison. But today it's more associated with treasure, blockbuster movies, or Halloween. And in designing something that retains its meaning over time is surprisingly difficult, as we kind of go back to the study of the radioactive symbol and the archetypes that were relied upon to develop those symbols of warning for generations in 10,000 years. So the Jolly Roger's one, and there's a lot of the pictures that I was seeing of, oh no, there comes the pirates and the death, and then, okay, here comes the pirates, yay, which we're gonna see very, very soon with Halloween being next week. And so then another one that came up for me was the pentagram. So the pentagram, it has a lot of controversy in our Western world, often portrayed as a symbolic representation of Satanism. However, religions have used it to symbolize the 5 elements of life: fire, earth, metal, water, and wood. And it's believed to contain magical properties. So it has much more religious symbolism, way past what we might initially say, like, oh, that is satanic. And it, and sometimes some bands cross over and use it too. So we've stripped it a little bit of its meaning in all circles, but at the same time, there's a certain kind of fear that we have in our Western culture. So early Christians believed that the pentagram, used the pentagram to represent the Star of Bethlehem too. So it hasn't always been representative of Satanism. And then we have the swastika. So, one of the most balanced designs, and I had to look up an official definition of this. So the swastika, which means good fortune or well-being, appears to have been used in Eurasia as early as 7,000 years ago, perhaps representing the movement of the sun through the sky. It's to this day a sacred symbol in Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Odinism, and they appear on artifacts from pre-Christian European cultures. But we also know that this is a symbol that brings us some hesitation when we see it, and some apprehension. So at this point, you've been my audience, and I thought I would tell you a little bit more about me, and how dropping in those last few symbols sort of came about. So I grew up in a small town, not tiny, not super tiny, but a small town, about 20,000 people. I think it had about 25,000 people then. It has less than 20,000 people now. It's called El Dorado. It's not El Dorado, but it's El Dorado, Arkansas, and it's about right here. So in this town, not very big, we have one courthouse, and this is our little square. And I lived here probably from the time I was 5 until the time that I went off to college. So in thinking about that swastika, this came up a few years ago, in that inside that courthouse, that beautiful little quaint courthouse, there are tiles on the floor, marble tiles that have different symbols in them. Some of them are oak leaves, some of them are just other shapes. And one symbol that they have on the floor there is a swastika. So a small, and this is straight from the El Dorado News Times, a small ceramic tile in the Union County Courthouse floor has ignited controversy after a former city council member posted the photograph of the tile on Facebook last week. So the tile in question features a swastika and is on the floor of the courthouse where voters exit from voting booths, and the tile has been in the courthouse since the building was constructed. And there is some discrepancy over in the town. Some people say, well, the swastika has been there since before the Nazis had appropriated it. Some people say, no, it hasn't. The Nazis already existed for 10 years before this tile was inlaid. Some people want to rip it up. It's not exactly the most, it's not exactly the cheapest thing, especially for a small town in southern Arkansas. But I do have a friend. This is my friend Kimberly. She and I have been really close friends since I was probably in the 1st grade. And one thing about Kimberly is she is Jewish, and she's made this her kind of goal to make this important, to get the swastika out of our Union County Courthouse. So she started this conversation up a few months back, and when she wanted some opinions from different people about, do we think that it would be worth the cost to try to get the tile up? Would it somehow disintegrate the structure of the courthouse? Could the tile be replaced? And she was asking one of my other friends, who is a pretty great architect, what she thought about taking this tile up. So Kimberly had said, yes, it did once stand for something else, but 100 years later, it's a hate symbol. It was appropriated, yes, like some things are, but symbols and meanings change over time. Show someone a pentagram now and they think of Satan instead of its original meaning. And the Nazis also took lightning bolts and an eagle design for themselves, but the swastika is the one that is normally associated with them. And so my thought process really went to, if the meaning did change, then should we change where and how we use it? And my friend Joanne Architect answered her back, and I thought this was just the best answer that she could possibly give, and so much more thoughtful. Joanne's so smart than I probably could have given at the moment. She says, "I agree with you. It has been wholly overwritten by hate and has no place in a public building, and there's no reason to hang on to it, no matter what the original meaning may have been." So then I really wanted to question myself and question everyone here. If the meaning did change, then should we change where and how we use it? And so that's really my third point as a graphic designer is graphic designers use visual communication to persuasively relay calls to action. And so I wanted my call to action today to be thinking about symbols. And if the meaning has changed, then should we change where and how we use it? And so consider the symbol whose meaning has changed. Is it doing more harm than good? And I just reinforced that tile from the El Dorado News Times. And so this was all brought about by a conversation that I was just having with my friend. And she understood that she wanted to get this removed. That's her goal, that's her call to action right now. But it also came about as a time that this was happening also in El Dorado, and she didn't want this to overshadow. So she parked her call to action at the moment. So this is also actually happened in El Dorado over the summer, the town where I live, a very small town. So they also have a Confederate statue, and a lot of people had said that the meaning of this had changed and it was doing more harm than good. And so that's more of their call to action at the moment, and the thing that I really wanted to leave you with in thinking about symbols. So thank you for your time. This is me, and hopefully you'll remember what a graphic designer does and how my job does kind of relate and bring us back to symbols.
Thank you so much, Professor Selph. That was phenomenal.
Thank you.
And just a really lovely fit with the entire series. So thank you for reading my mind and the mind of all of the people who have participated in this series.
Oh, yay.
We all really appreciate it. And
yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks for asking me to do this, because it helped me, I think, examine, you know, questions that I had in my own mind about, you know, why do we use this heart symbol, or why is the Jolly Roger like that? And you know, I get so much kind of information and ideas from 99% Invisible and from other podcasts and from the book, you know, 100 things that designers need to know about people. But it gave me a chance to go back through all those things and kind of dig out those details. So it was really fun and enlightening for me too.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.